So without further ado, a very, very warm welcome to the new P&L. Thank you very much all the panelists for joining us today. And I know this will be a fantastic discussion around audacious and resilient leadership. Audacious leadership, and by audacious, I mean bold and courageous, and resilient leadership are two of the core key characteristics that are needed for any successful research and development and innovation program or process in business. And we know innovation is at the heart of growth in business, and it's actually at the heart of growth in society as well. It's how we evolve through innovation. So Kazu, I'd like to start the conversation with you today and understand how you as president and CEO of NTT Research ensure that the principles of audaciousness, of courageous decision-making and resilience, how they continue to underpin your thinking and your work at NTT Research, and also how they form the basis of your relationships with your partners through the Open Lab strategy.
Sure. First of all, thank you very much, Paul, for having me to these conversations. So, my name is Kazu. I'm the CEO of NTT Research. NTT Research is that a little bit unique setup that we are doing an R&D, but not so much on the product development. It's rather doing the basic research to impact the wide variety of peoples for the next 5 to 10 years. So because of that nature of our quotes unquote business, the members of basically my companies are really strong R&D background in a very specific field, rather academic type of R&D. So to be able to make, well, basically as a leader, naturally, either audacious or resilience or what, that as a nature of the leader, I think you need to really support the success of everyone. Or the team, of course, the team's success, and then to make the team successful, your team member needs to be successful. So, so that's the goal of it. And in my philosophy of the Open Lab, and then I think to be a good leader, I would like to point out a couple of things. That first of all, you need to have a very good visions that how you want the whole team to be, how to define the success of the team, and then you need to be able to tell people what's the state of the success to this group, and so yeah, you need to have a good visions, and you need to be able to articulate this vision to the members, and then from there. You just need to support, empower the team members, and then support the team members to be successful. And then towards that, a couple of things I would like to point out. One is that you need to be allowed that mistakes, that first mistakes, I think everybody makes mistakes. Well, you need to be stand up towards that the repeated mistakes, but first mistakes, that's okay. Let's just learn from it. Let's move on. I think that attitude is very important. And then finally, another important thing is that just the fairness to everyone. That
yes.
So I think when I think about that, well, when I follow the leadership, good leadership, those are like 4 or 5 things that I admire the leaders. And then also, so because of that, I've tried to educate myself to be like that. So, and then that kind of creates the open-minded environment, and then freer discussions, and then more innovative, and then transparent organizations that you can create.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So vision, empowerment, communication, the ability to fail and learn from failure, and that sense of fairness and kindness within an organization. Those are the 4 or 5 that you espouse there. And Franziska, I'm sure you share those views in terms of your work as global head of digital services and applications at Siemens Smart Infrastructure. How do you embed those principles that sit beneath audacious and resilient leadership? How do you embed them in a business's culture, and how is it delivered in Siemens in that regard?
So that has a really various aspect, because I'm fully with Kazu on, the aspect of vision and or really something that really connects with people. So connection is very important, but then also the reflection, right? Because you wouldn't want to do the same mistakes over and over. You want to learn from the past, to be able to kind of, let the strains go. And I think in terms of, how do we embed that, I think it's very important to understand culture not as this fluffy thing that's somewhat given, but understand ourselves as this part of shaping the culture, because culture is the way we do things around here. And that includes everyone. It's not someone telling us, that's a go and that's a no-go. But it's really our actions, our behaviors and mindset that speak. And so when it comes to really um, embedding this culture, to be more adventurous in our thinking, being more courageous, um, and encourage resilience. I think it starts really with strategy and vision. In order to have a clear understanding of what does innovation mean for us. Because in the first step, it's not so much important, are we flying to the moon or to Mars, or are we even going on a rocket ship, but do we have the same starting point and understanding? And that, in my experience in the past, has been a huge issue, that sometimes when we take these big words such as innovation, um, a different idea pops in everyone's head.
Yes.
I think the second part in that is really building an operating system around that in terms of the processes and tools to support us, and also being aware of what are the parts where we're really kind of evolving our existing business, and where are we really creating potentially new moonshots and new startups within the organization. And there, I think a very important part is to provide really the platform, to provide the stage and hold that stage, no matter how
Mhm.
the business is going, but really hold that stage, and with that give the freedom to the entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in a large corporate. And I think one thing that we've implemented is that we have very clear guardrails for transparency. So there's a certain amount of money that you can just decide on your own.
Mhm.
Obviously I can ask my boss, my colleagues, but I can just do it. And then, my job as the leader is, in case it were to fail, then, support my people and stand in front of them. But I
Yes.
think we need to give that trust and that freedom to move. And there, my experience is also that continued coaching support is of utmost importance. For example, we
Mhm.
have a coach on standby where people can always go. You don't need to share with anyone what you're talking about, but you need to have a support system. If you change the things that you're working on, the what you're doing, it's also utmost important to change, how are we doing these things? And that's then really where it comes to the key for me of culture and mindset.
Yeah.
And their consistency really is key, because we need to show it and prove it every day, and then also once again reflect on, what's working well, how can we enforce that more, and where are the things also maybe where we took a wrong term and sent also a wrong signal, or put a wrong narrative into the organization. And so I think it's very much about these small everyday things, in addition to obviously having a vision and creating this joint picture, for people to come in onto the journey.
Yes. And you're absolutely right. Consistency is the key in this. And John, you are a president and CEO of a global network that brings together some of the world's most creative, independent marketing and advertising agencies. And they're agencies who, like many businesses over the last 2 years, have had to be consistently resilient in the face of what we've all faced economically and culturally, I think, as well, with a hybrid workplace. And they've had to deliver, I guess, more innovative and creative solutions within a business context, not just for clients, to ensure that they can come through the pandemic and thrive. From your discussions with your partner agencies, I'd love to understand your views and their views on how they've transformed their culture, how they've maintained that resilience, and how they've found the creative impetus within the organization to come out of this pandemic with more enthusiasm and more passion for what they do.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. And I to build on some of the things that were said earlier, I agree 100% in the power of clarity of vision. I think that one thing that's critically important is the power of alignment. Okay, so that throughout the organization, that we not only know where we're going, but how we will get there. That we
Mm-hmm.
have a compass, because being audacious and resilient is not always easy. It's
Yes.
and sometimes it's celebrated, sometimes it's challenged, and sometimes even as a leader, you question yourself. But when you have that clarity of vision and when you have that alignment within the group, then it gives the organization comfort and it gives it a level of steadiness, so that the behaviors of the leaders become predictable and understood and never really questioned, because everybody, including the leaders, understands the where and the how and the why. And so when you think about the context of what we've all gone through, and now, depending on where you are in the world, we're 2 years into this. I think fundamentally where our agencies have maybe shifted a bit of their mindset that has helped them through a very challenging time, is that in the advertising agency world, our agency experience has many times been defined with a client first mentality, right? What does the client want from us? What do they need us to be? And we engineer the agency around that. And now more than ever, there's been a greater emphasis on the agency experience being equally as defined by what experience we create for our employees, not just for our clients. And so you've had this shift, I think, at our agencies that have allowed us to put what are the needs of our employees first and foremost, not at the expense of accountability, but to allow them to create and lean into an environment that is much more flexible based on the impact of what the last 2 years has had on us. As consumers, we have this ability to personalize our experience with a brand, right? If you think about your experience buying through Amazon, you have a very personalized experience of what you want and how you buy it and what have you. And I think that we're seeing that degree of personalization now come to the employee experience within agencies. And our leaders have been very, very open to listening to what employee requirements were. I think that we used to think about personalizing our work experiences. I'm going to decorate my office or my cube with my pictures and a variety of ways to decorate my office. But personalization of that agency experience as an employee now is about when I work and how I work and who I work with. And so I think one of the biggest fundamental changes I've seen with our leaders has been this: we are a people-based, service-based organization. And what can we do first and foremost to ensure that our employees are thriving against this aligned vision that we have to deliver for our clients? Because it's been proven through data that when you have high degree of employee satisfaction, that you have a high degree of client satisfaction, and these organizations are more profitable. So I think to kind of wrap that up all in one, I think what our agency leaders have done is really embraced a people-first mentality during this time, and it's served them extremely well.
And Franziska, in the conversations you've had with clients and your team, do you feel we have, broadly speaking, the pandemic has enabled more courageous thinking and more resilience, or do you think that it's reduced the ability of businesses to be more courageous and more audacious because of the perceived risk that comes with that in a more commercially challenging environment? What do you think the aggregate effect of the pandemic will be on our ability as business people and leaders to make more courageous decisions and our ability to be more resilient?
I think there's two sides to the medal, really. If I look at our business, I think the reason why we've been so successful, not only in the last year, but the last couple of years, but especially also since the pandemic hit, was because one, we had a security in our supply chain. And so, where many of our competitors could not deliver the product to their customers, we could. But that is obviously something, that we never really looked as an KPI for innovation and, audacious decision making in our organization. But that's then something, that really our customers came to rely on and made a huge part of our success. On the other hand, we clearly see, we're in the building space, so building automation. And really, I think overall the rules of the game changed, but it also enforced many of the things that I think we've been working towards doing in our visions. I mean, one topic is, clean air. I think, if you live in a metropolitan area, I think it's always been somewhat, at least, a consideration. But now with the pandemic, it's really become top of mind. And so suddenly, for the topics that we have been driving as maybe in the first step of SPOCs for innovation and testing out and not really sure, is there really a market? I mean, we saw it, but that really accelerated here. And so I feel like if I look not only as us and as an organization, but our customers, I think there has been a lot stronger focus on safety and security, but at the same point in time, a lot more willingness to engage in new technologies and looking towards, so how can technology and engineering allow us to solve the problems that we're actually facing?
Yes.
And so I definitely see that with our customers, it's really accelerated their digital maturity, because the question I think that we all had to ask ourselves is, how do we adapt, and how do we really create resilient anti-fragile systems? And there you can definitely see, it's not about how strong you are, how good your financials are, but how can you really there adapt to change, and once again put people first. I think it's so important, not only for our visions, but also our products and services, for them to really connect to people and address a relevant need, not only for our customers, but also our customers' customers or their users, and really kind of think these steps ahead. And I think there definitely I've seen companies becoming a lot more open and taking this extra step and understanding a lot more around the ecosystem that they're actually operating in. And with that, then taking the courage and potentially even vulnerability in their own decision making of really understanding not only who are we today and what can we leverage of our strength from today, what is kind of the core or the USP that we bring as a company, and the people kind of making this company great, but also who do we really want to be in the future, what do we do, and why does it matter?
Yes.
And I think definitely, being able to do that in parallel is definitely something I think that pandemic has challenged us and really reminded us to do, to not just rely on your core growth drivers and just evolve from there. I think it really showed the necessity.
And Kazu, does that reflect your experience over the last 2 years in terms of your conversations?
Yes, absolutely. And I think when it comes to the pandemics, I'm sure that a couple of years from now, many books are going to be written, and then we probably learn a little more 360 degrees of the analytics of how people reacted to things and all that. So whatever I saw, I can tell is only, based upon what I experienced, what I saw, and everything. But within that, when I think about this pandemic, well, it's been 2+ years. So I feel like there were definitely phases that at the beginning, there was so much uncertainties. And I think depending upon the industry that you are in, but some people really need to be there, need to survive, definitely survival mode. And then some survival mode, due to survival mode, some people needed to do a really innovative thing, just think outside of the box, otherwise you get killed and everything. But some people didn't even have that, cannot afford those kind of things. You just need to cling on something that they have. But that was the kind of there's so much uncertainty that everybody were kind of really struggled. But when you think about it, over the last year or so, that the people start feeling this is kind of like a new normal, and then definitely, there are many bad things about this pandemic, but the pandemic gave us a chance to realize so many things that I think everybody agrees with this kind of statement. I think what you realize is depending upon who you are and what you do, but I think that the people realize that some of the things that you didn't really have to do, or there are so many other ways, better way to do the same thing, to reach the same results. So I think from that perspective, to answer your question, Paul, that I think that because of this disruption for everyone, I think when those disruption happens, people really clear up their mind and then come up with the new ideas. So again, there might be some better analytics needs to be done and are going to be done maybe a year from now, 2 years from now. But I would imagine that there are some more, probably when you think back, more innovation might have happened.
Yes.
Throughout the industries and throughout the humankind. That's my kind of take on it.
Yeah. And John, what's been interesting, I think, for the marketing and advertising industry is for the last decade, if not longer, there have been concerns in the industry around the increasing transactional nature of the relationship between client and agency, and agencies perhaps selling their creative or giving away their creative just to get the accountant to deliver the transaction. However, I know from the conversations you and I have had in the last year, many clients have turned to the agencies for, perhaps for the first time in many years, in some instances, for their strategic input, because they've run out of ideas as clients themselves. And I wonder whether you've seen a new sense of emboldenedness and courage in the agencies that you're working with, that actually they're sitting back at the top table with those clients and they're discussing the strategic decisions with them rather than just activating them, if you like.
Absolutely. I think that, again, we keep going back to this time peg of, let's call it March-ish 2020, where there were many clients who if you were in the travel and tourism industry in March of 2020, and we had one agency in particular that was 95% of their work was done in travel and tourism. I mean, it was 100%, and almost 100% of their clients stopped 100% of their spending in 1 week. And so there was a requirement for an all hands on deck approach to not just solving a specific brief that a client gave to an agency. It was, we have a problem that we need to solve right now. And you saw a very literally level playing field, because as we are here today, it was no longer the big client and the agency. We were all the same size on Zoom. And there was the hierarchy, the separation, despite us being literally separated from one another, diminished. And it was, we have a business problem that we need to solve right now. This wasn't, I need a new ad campaign or I need more media spent here. It was, how are we going to now take a business that was underprepared from an e-commerce perspective and quickly get them to an e-commerce environment? Or we were 100% direct to consumer in an e-commerce environment. We can't keep up with inventory. We can't keep up with fulfillment. How can you help us think through this from an agency perspective? It was no longer just solving communication problems. It was identifying solutions for short-term and times business problems. And so what we saw as a result, and you referenced this earlier, that many times in the agency business, clients come to you and they ask you for your perspective. And if they like your perspective, that you've given away for free, they'll hire you to do some of the work. Now, the fastest growing service offering within our agencies has been strategy. It's been consulting. It's been sprints. It's very specific requirements and briefs. We need to solve this over the next 6 weeks. And so what you found as a perhaps unintended consequence was you had clients and agencies working in a much more iterative fashion together to solve a problem. And I think that happened in any organization where you had different functions and highly matrix organizations. The walls went down and everybody came together to just solve the immediate problems that we have. So I think that was an incredible outcome of all of this, that the level of collaboration and the minimizing of the posturing between the relationships was just gone away. It's like, let's get this done. And I think it has been liberating, not just for our industry, but for all industries.
So when you look at that example and we think about the vaccines and the levels of collaboration and partnership that went on to develop the vaccines in record time as well, Kazu and Franziska, do you think that businesses working together in that partnership model, whether it's open labs and in Kazu's example, whether there's a rethinking and a reframing of the way partnerships can work when it comes to innovation, the relationship between two partners, one of which may have more of a balance of power in that relationship. It could be a large corporate and a small startup, for example. But do you think it's encouraged businesses to rethink and reframe the way they work together in the partnership model? Kazu, perhaps if we start with you.
Sure. So I think, again, depending upon which industry you are and what kind of job you are doing, it's all different. But from my world of kind of open lab and the research and the development type of job that we are doing, I think the thing is that more the people-to-people connection is certainly very important, and then that is gone. So when I think about it, it's I think it kind of those existing human network really played a very important roles in when I think back a couple of like last 2 years, that it was sometimes kind of difficult to really create the deeper relationships with the people you get to know over Zoom or over WebEx or whatever, versus that I met with this person 2 years ago and had some drinks and in the past, and those kind of things kind of re-emerged, and then kind of going back there. I feel like that happened a lot. But having said that, it is certainly that because of the benefit of this online communication, so you don't have to spend so much time to travel to meet with the peoples and so on. So I think certainly the combination of the two, but still, that kind of, we saw that the benefit of this online communication, that you can reach out to so many people very quickly, but when you really make a deeper relationship, deeper kind of partnerships and stuff like that, you need the trust, and you need the good understanding to each other. That requires a bit of kind of groundwork before you reach there, kind of thing. That's kind of what I feel.
And Franziska, from your point, in terms of the way you reframe or rethink about collaboration and partnerships now, has that changed as a result of what we've experienced over the pandemic?
It hasn't changed so much on the operative or operational level. Where it really has changed is more on a strategic level, in terms of really entering strategic partnerships to potentially conquer new markets or new customer groups, or find a different way of really approaching the market. Where I definitely see in all the companies that we partner with, I think there's a lot stronger focus. I can even see that for us. We are a lot more precise and focused on where can we really make a difference, and what's kind of the piece that we can give, but with that also obviously knowing what's the other pieces that we need that kind of contribute to this overall vision. And there I definitely see a lot more movement in terms of really creating these platforms for collaboration and strategic partnerships of entering the new, whether it's customers, markets, new products that we bring to market jointly, or even develop together. I think where we're still struggling, and there I'm excited to see really hopefully innovation in this area as well, of how to really come together. It still seems like a very strenuous process of like, how do you do the revenue share? How do we, as Kazu said, on a people centric level, how do we really grow together? What's really kind of especially, sometimes you have large corporates and smaller players playing together, right? And it can be so overwhelming, where even though you share a joint vision, you're just saying, well, sorry, this is getting too much for us. There's all these processes that we somehow need to adhere to. And then we need to become a lot more flexible and faster as well, right? Because I mean, many opportunities are timely, they're time-based.
Yes.
And so there, I'm really excited for potentially new business model, new ways of collaboration, and new operating models also emerging to make that a lot more normal, where it's maybe not just two corporates or corporate entities joining together, but basically people that share around the vision and can create and can just really start moving. And with that, it's not only just also on a mindset level, just important of, how do we want to be and how do we want to work together, but what is it that we're not going to do
Yes.
to really help us in this journey.
Yeah. Like anything in corporate culture, it's generally easier to build from the foundations up rather than retrofit. And I'd love to get all of your views on how we install audacious and resilient leadership in those businesses that start today, or those businesses of the future. What are the right foundations to ensure that business that launches tomorrow has audacious and courageous decision making, has resilient leadership at its heart? How do you start and build a business with those characteristics at its core? John, perhaps if we start with you on this.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a little bit about this, a lot about this around the importance of clarity and vision. I think establishing that very, very early on. I also believe that the role, and this means different things to different people, but I think the power of community over company is a really interesting notion that I think, especially in a startup environment, but certainly in an established environment, that has to be leveraged even greater than before. There's kind of culture has sometimes driven community, but I fundamentally believe that we have come together as people, as global citizens, as companies, as clients, as service providers, around a shared enemy to some extent, and it's really amplified the power of connectivity and community.
Mm-hmm.
I think that should be a driving factor in every aspect of the people that you're hiring and as you're building your team, the mentors that you surround yourself with, that enable. What's great about a community, and Kazu, you said this earlier on this power in failure. Okay, that it takes the individual failure and elevates it to a what can be a communal success, right, in a communal area of learning. And so I think that this community-based proposition and how you're building your organization from the beginning, or how you're transitioning an established organization, I think is a critical piece of this. And I think that the other piece is within that community, as you are leaning into a shared vision, which removes some subjectivity and leans into objectivity. You have to also empower that community to leverage their instincts and their intuition, because I think those have served us extremely well over the last 2 years. And so I just think that it comes down to, as obvious as that may seem, is building the right team and the right culture that's going to celebrate success as much as you celebrate failure, and bringing that group together in a way that we balance this individual subjectivity and instincts with the collective objectivity of a community that's aligned against a shared goal. So I think that's incredibly important, because I think one thing that we've seen is, audacious and resilient are such big words. And I think that the pandemic has required that behavior for us to lean into it. But I think you also had leaders who have been successful who were acting in that way before the pandemic. And so that when this hit and it required this level of behavior, it was already in place. And so those organizations were thriving. They had distributed workforces 3 or 4 years ago. They had been on Zoom 2 to 3 years ago. And so there were some established foundations that when something like this happens, I don't want to say they were prepared, but they were more steady and able to adapt. So if you can build this into your organization from day one, when these unique situations and perhaps hopefully once in a lifetime events happen, you can ride it through. Right? This may have been the catalyst for new behavior, but I think if we can establish it and let it guide us consistently, when these things happen, we'll be prepared.
You used a phrase earlier in that answer, and you said that personal failure leads to communal success. And in order for personal failure to lead to communal success, it has to have collective ownership. And one of the presentations we give, John, as you know, with the new P&L is on audacious and resilient leadership. And we argue within that presentation that, or we discuss the importance of leadership at all levels, that there needs to be responsibility and leadership at all levels of a business within your own sphere of influence. It can't be just, in my mind, can't be just left to the traditional leader, the CEO, the senior management. Kazu, perhaps if we start with you, I'd love to get your view on what the balance of responsibility needs to be between the traditional leaders, the senior management, and the personal responsibility of all employees to create that community of success or that communal success, to take collective ownership of individual failure and use it to create success. What's the balance of leadership responsibility between senior and employee?
Sure. I think at the end of the day, like John just mentioned, that to implement that the audacious and resilient leadership, you just need to create the community at a good level of community that you can trust. I think from the CEO, I think how to create the trust level with it across the board of the organizations, and to do that, you just need to allow them to fail, and you just treat them fairly. All those kind of things is very, very important. But to create those basically put those the leader throughout the organizations, you just definitely need to find that who can be the leadership, the capacity, who has the leadership capacities. Certainly, if you have multiple people members in your team, there's some weakness to strong weakness and strong strength that each one of them has. So you need to be able to identify. I think as a leader, as a CEO of the or the leader of the big team, you need to be able to identify who can be your next level leaders and next level leaders. I think that's definitely the key important features of the CEO, that who identify the key individuals. And of course, that in the second or the next layer individual, they probably have to do the same thing, but in a smaller the pool of people, from the smaller pool of people. But I think that the common theme of all those people are the shared visions, and then the alignment that John alluded earlier of these conversations. I think that needs to be consistently implemented throughout the team.
Yes.
But again, from the CEO, that probably the difference between the CEO and then the a lower level in the totem pole people is that you need to really identify who can be that leader,
Yes.
that you can really groom and then trust, and then that kind of thing. That's my opinion.
And Franziska, from your perspective, where does the balance lie? And perhaps there's an example within Siemens about how you demonstrate that balance between mid-level and leadership at all levels.
So this is really my personal view. I think it's definitely shared in parts within Siemens, but I mean, I would be lying if I were to say, okay, the whole of Siemens is going in that direction and we're already there. But for me, everyone is a leader. And I definitely do see and feel, and experience has shown that we need to have a lot more an organizational system and setup that where really the team, in terms of could be a project team or product team or whatever it is kind of the entity of organization. And those are then the ones that really do need to take the ownership as if it were their own business. And that for me means we need a lot flatter hierarchies than we often see today. But obviously that needs strong leadership, and that needs to come out of the people. And so here I really see that in order to move to more adaptive organizations, also we need to kind of really question the levels or the organizational setup in terms of hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we really put the team as the entity of organization, then what needs to happen in order for that team to win is they need to have a learning orientation, right? They need to be able to leverage, what they have in common, maybe in terms of their vision and passion, but also their differences in terms of, because each person is bringing something very individual in terms of their expertise, experience, and strengths to the table. But the team can only win if, it's more than the single pieces that it's coming together on. And that also means, when we talk about, audacious and really creating the new and driving new innovations, and being resilient while we're doing that, which, by the way, for me, resiliency, and I'm not sure if we share the same definition in this group even, is, it's not about how strong you are as an individual or as a team. It's about how you recharge, knowing that all that we're doing is going to take energy. And so I think there's a very hard truth about these innovative cultures. And in Siemens, we're usually very good in saying, where we want to go. So we also say, obviously we want to have collaboration, but I think, John, you raised a very important point when you talked about accountability and ownership. And so I think there's always kind of a balance that we need to keep. Yes, we want collaboration, and team needs to be the entity of organization, but nonetheless, each one of us is individually accountable. Same goes for, we all obviously need to feel psychologically safe. Otherwise, if we don't feel safe, we can't be creative. And if you then also don't have a tolerance for failure, then it's hardly that any innovation is really going to happen. But at the same point in time, we need to be able to talk brutally honest and candidly with each other. And we need to have this willingness to experiment, but that needs to happen in a very, very disciplined manner. And I think what's oftentimes missing is, the counterpart, the other side of that medal. Same for, yes, we need a tolerance for failure, but I mean, do we really want to be tolerant towards incompetence? I guess we don't, right? And I think that there it's really a way of defining and creating that learning orientation and making these value systems very tangible, but also creating, I call this the red line, kind of what's kind of the no-go zone. So what's the space that we're moving in, but what are also the areas, not just content-wise, but really from a mindset, cultural and collaborative standpoint, where we say, if that's happened, then, we really failed in terms of, yes, it's still an attempt in learning, but that's what we're not going to do. And these things also need to have consequences. And I often find, especially when we talk about innovation and courage and being audacious and taking, big decisions, we're missing that other part, so the bottom line, so to say.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Two of the words that have come out of those answers that resonated with me, one is trust and the other is energy in regards to resilience. In October last year, was reported that NTT's financial unit, NTT Finance Corp, which is a sister company to NTT Research within the group, it sold 300 billion yen of green notes in a 3-part deal, and it was the biggest offer of environmentally friendly debt in Japan, according to Bloomberg's data that it compiled. And it's a really good example, I think, of audacious and ambitious leadership, and certainly the sort of thinking that's needed in order for businesses to play their role in meeting climate change and environmental targets in this particular instance. But just because a decision is audacious or courageous doesn't necessarily mean that it's without cynicism or criticism in return. And there's particularly, I guess, in a world where people are looking towards brands and questioning trust, and there's a gap between promises and actions and all those other things that sit around corporate and brand management, if you like. So in your view, once we've made that audacious decision, like the example I've given, and there's an intervening period between the promise and the decision made and the evidence of the success of that decision, how do we maintain our resilience as a business and as a culture while we're asking people, stakeholders, whoever they are, to continue to trust us while we get to that point of success, evidence and success? Kazu, as I've cited NTT, perhaps if we start with you.
Yeah, again, that's where obviously the consistencies, and then stick with the vision. That is that importance of it. And I think that the example you just introduced, Paul, thank you for finding that out in the news channel. But I think that right now, over the last, I think 12 months, 24 months, especially this climate change is super highlighted. It has been on the focus for many people's mind, but the more and more, obviously, people highlights that the importance of it, which is definitely a right thing to do, in my opinion. And I think everybody thinks the same way. From the entity's perspective, we needed to send those, in a way, the vision. Definitely, this is a vision statement from the company's perspective, and then this is taking a little bit time to come up with the 300 billion yen, which is about 3 billion US dollars, give or take. So it takes a little bit of time. So in a way, that longer commitment, and then also very bold commitment from entity group's perspective. So I believe this is a great, thank you for again, introducing this as audacious decisions that entity management had made. And, but perhaps this is certainly a good example of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And John, from your perspective, I mean, it's well recognized within the advertising and the marketing community. You come up with a fantastic creative idea. Sometimes those ideas, when they feed into campaigns, those campaigns take a while to deliver, to provide the results, because it's the nature of a campaign. What's your experience within your organization and talking to partners about how they maintain the faith of their clients while those campaigns take a while to gather momentum, if you like, however strong the creative idea might be?
Yeah, when just listening to some of the conversation here and even the prior topic, I think that we all many times find ourselves in the world of risk mitigation, right? And people have, especially in the marketing world, have become somewhat addicted to the predictability of the outcomes based on the data and the ability to analyze the impact of the work that we're doing. And so we expect that level of predictability across the board. And if you look at the average tenure of CMOs, it's now 41 months. Okay, so you've got the pressures of a CMO who's trying to extend her or his, where she sits on that average, of tenure. And so you're looking for a higher degree of predictability so that you can, when you're having a conversation with the CFO and you're having a conversation with the CEO, who's then having conversation with shareholders, they are looking for a level of proof and confidence that this is going to work. Our patience has waned. Okay. Now, but a shift that I'm seeing is that clients are now realizing, from a marketing perspective, that the short-term ROI model is not sustainable over time, because you get to a place where you can only optimize a campaign so much, and then you run out of customers to speak to, and so you have to bring power back in brand and some broader building brand marketing initiatives to increase the funnel and bring people back in. So there has been a shift, because, as you know, you've seen many publicly traded companies who will continue to cut expenses to meet the numbers, but they're realizing that's not a sustainable strategy. So what we have going, I think, in our favor, not to be so defensive about the power of building a brand, is that companies are realizing that it's not either or. It's how do we have the very predictable behaviors and campaigns that we know are going to drive revenue now, while we're also building a longer term proposition of a sustainable brand that is many times going into areas that brands haven't gone before, whether that's in the areas of ESG or in DEI, and those require kind of a longer term commitment. So going back to where we were early in the conversation, I think that there is a greater degree of trust that is being built. That we've had to rely on people because we're in uncharted territories here, and so we haven't taken that for granted. We've come in and been very strategic and very forthright in how we believe that this will serve the business long term and short term. So I don't know, Paul. We always get into this, data versus creativity, art versus science conversation, and it's just, I think there is a marriage of the two. that whether you are how you manage your people or how you manage your marketing campaigns, is the balance that we have to strike. Because you're right, there's a level of accountability that we expect from our people, and we can measure those KPIs and how they're performing, but we also want to give them the freedom to explore. And when we talk about failure and exploration, this is not failure at all costs. There are people who subscribe to the fail fast mentality, but I do think it really comes back to something Franziska said, and that's a learning model, right? That's at the end of the day. If we're not in learning and we're not improving on what we're doing, then failure is failure.
Mm. And Franziska, from your point of view, you're a smart infrastructure. You are like Kazu, you are defining the future and helping to build it, but the future doesn't always turn out the way we anticipated when we're innovating. How do you maintain the faith and the belief and the resilience in that process between the idea and the innovation and the fruition of that idea?
So it comes for me back to leadership, and leadership is not necessarily only how I lead my team or collaborate with the people around me, but also how do I lead myself. So I measure my own resilience and audacity on how well am I taking care of myself. And I think that's what needs to happen in the team, because if I do that, then once again I have energy to create and to give and to think bigger. Because I'm feeling good with myself and in myself. And so it comes back to, I think, there also leadership in how do we create these things for people and really take a different point of view. So Siemens, for example, we talked about sustainability. We've implemented, I think roughly a year ago, a degree framework that's really for the entirety of Siemens, a mandatory framework to drive not only sustainability forward in our businesses, in our own operations, but also, taking decisive step when it comes to diversity and inclusion, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, that's something where if you roll that out, you could just take that as, oh, now I have to fill out the spreadsheet and say, how do I contribute towards these goals? Or you could take it in the team and say, okay, we understand the goals, but maybe it's not about, listing portfolio items or initiatives and activities, but thinking about a totally new way of how we could create value, not only for us as an organization, but once again, they're also for our partners, customers, and stakeholders. And we did that with our team. So this initiative came. We already saw, in Europe, there is a huge initiative around the Green Deal, where we see a huge impact for commercial buildings, small, medium-sized commercial buildings, to be automated to have quite a positive impact on the CO2 blueprint globally. And then seeing on the other hand side trends that in automation, not only building automation, also in the industrial sphere and manufacturing, we know that there is a move away from the controller-based automation towards IoT and the emergence of IoT and seeing how the price levels decrease. I mean, that just allowed us as a team to reframe, but that's where leadership comes in. It doesn't mean that needs to be me. That can be the team as a whole or somebody else in the team, but someone just taking a step back and saying, hold on a minute, is this really what we're going to do now? Or, isn't there something else that really also then creates value? And that could also just be for us as a team, because this is something that we're excited about. Yes. And you sometimes need this to reframe. So it comes back to leadership, but I don't want to, put this leadership on specific people or those that are called leaders. Here, I really want more and more for everyone in the organization to take ownership and start that. But that is a way, right? Because I think our comfort zone in many parts of how we work today is still, someone tells me what to do and then I go and do it, to the best of my ability. So how do I move into really co-creating? Because that means a risk, right? I put ideas forth there and might be people don't like it and judge me for it. Yes. So, why should I still speak up? And how can I create an environment where that feels not only safe for me, but also the people around me? To really, really do that.
No, that's a great insight. Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask just one more practical question as we come towards the end of the roundtable. It's been a fantastic discussion. One of the key factors that has influenced the Great Resignation is, I guess, over the last 2 years, millions and millions of employees right around the globe having a bit more time to realize that perhaps the businesses they are working for lack purpose, or defined purpose at least, or a purpose that aligns with them personally, and that the leadership of that business lacks a defined vision, to go back to Kazu's point and everyone's point, in fact, today. In your views, what practical steps could leaders take tomorrow within a business to start the process of changing both the perceptions of a lack of leadership and a lack of purpose, but also the reality within that business around purpose and vision? What could they do within their organizations tomorrow to start the process of moving towards a more vision-led and purpose-led organization? And how do you believe audacious and resilient leadership could assist them in their approach with this? John, if we start with you on this.
Sure. It's hard to generalize this because I think depending on the size of the organization, you may be taking some different approaches. Okay. You know, in a 1,000 employee organization versus a 10 employee organization, the path to getting to this it may be very different. As obvious as this may sound, I think there's step one is acknowledgement, right? There has to be a degree of vulnerability that says we're not doing this correctly. And that can be a challenge for leaders at all levels, right? Because we don't want to recognize that what we think has been very clear and what we're trying to accomplish isn't really resonating with the employees. And so I think there's a level of acknowledgement, number one, that needs to happen. And then I think there has to be a desire to truly listen. And you know, I don't want to, I said there are different approaches based on the size of the organization, but where I've seen larger organizations embark on this process has been a series of town halls with the CEOs, right? And some of them are done with Zoom, and you've got, you know, people asking questions and putting forth things in the chat, and you know, you literally cannot keep up with the questions and concerns that employees are raising because they're just bombarding at you. And you know, the CEO is trying to stay on task with the message that HR said this is what we want to stick, right? But I think you have to create a level of intimacy and one-on-one conversations with people at all levels. And to the point that Franziska said earlier about, you know, all the leaders involved in this process. The great thing about having a consistent and aligned vision and an approach to how we're going to lead an organization is that if that cascades down, it allows the leaders to scale, right? Because you cannot be everywhere and in every meeting, right? So this has to be something that is the entire organization listening. And this can't be a task force that's going to solve this problem, right? But it has to start, and it's kind of culture of the people versus for the people. And so I think that regardless of your size, there has to be this commitment to truly listening and doing so on an ongoing basis. This is not just we're going to do an employee survey and get a read on how we're doing. No, this is an ongoing iterative process. And the smaller you are, the more iterative it can be. And the more inclusive it can be. And so I believe that it has to be ongoing engagement. What you've heard from your employees, you have to share with the organization. This is where we're doing well, but this is where we're doing poorly and where we have to solve for this. We have to put forth a timeline for change, right? This is what we're going to now do. And these are the KPIs and how we're going to measure it. So this can sound really daunting, right? But I think you have to just start somewhere. Right. And all of the things that we're talking about, if it involves changing your leadership style or recreating a purpose for your organization, you have to start somewhere, and you have to be in there and testing and learning along the way. You're not going to recreate and rebuild your organization overnight. It is an ongoing iterative process that is one-to-one, that is coming from the people, not for the people. So that's just some kind of high level things. And, you know, where do you start tomorrow? It's have coffee with someone that you haven't in a while and say, how can I better serve you as a leader in this organization? It can start with the one-to-one conversations and take it from there.
I think that's great advice. And I'd probably add to that when they have those town halls, so often you see leaders and employees coming together with misaligned expectations, leaders expecting to deliver a dialogue and employees expecting a monologue. And that's you know, you've got to ensure that if you put yourself in front of those employees, that you're going to open yourself up to that dialogue and not just deliver a monologue, I think.
Well, and it's you have to. I mean, you're going to put yourself in that hot seat. It's going to come at you, and that's
Absolutely.
okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. You know?
Yeah. And Franziska, from your perspective?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that because I think there's also a bias in that, that employees in general expect, their leaders and management to know more and know better, which I think is, once again, if we go back to this understanding of team and a group of people kind of winning together, I think that we need to get rid of that. As well, because it's not about this one person knowing it all and knowing better than all the people in his or her team, right? I think it's really the collective coming together. But I think overall, where do we start making these changes? I think it's also sometimes where we very small connotations and things. I think as leaders, often we tend to give a lot of feedback. And I think, as John rightly said, we need to start asking for feedback, and maybe not just saying anything, but just taking it in and understanding and really empathizing and caring. I think the second thing that I've seen that creates a lot of energy is combining individual passions of the people you're working with the vision.
Mm-hmm.
And creating the vision around that. And we've seen that. So we are in a business that in the building industry is called comfort. So it's a comfort business. It's about heating, ventilation, air conditioning. But we looked at let's redefine comfort. What does it mean? If we're also not servicing the premium buildings that we're serving today, but also maybe looking at emerging countries, and how can we combine that with what we as individuals in this team are really, really passionate about? And it was astonishing, how we opened up the scope and once again took a different perspective and point of view, and the energy created was unparalleled to anything I'd honestly seen before. And then obviously the third part is to make it sustainable and make it a sustained part of the corporate DNA, is to create the operating system around it, and allow also for the learning opportunities for us to involve in not only the what we're working on and learning about new technologies and business models and so on, but also in terms of the tools we have in our hands to be able to do that, and the mindsets to really also share that and create that together.
Absolutely. I think sometimes the frameworks that underpin that consistency are too often neglected. I think there's an expectation that once you deliver that diktat or whatever it happens to be, that somehow miraculously and magically weaves itself through the culture and delivers. But actually there has to be a framework to allow that intangible nature of it to flourish, I think.
Yeah, and it's really not a sprint. I think it's it's a journey.
Absolutely.
It's several marathons in a row.
Yeah. And Kazu, the final word to you. What would you say in terms of what's the practical steps to deliver it?
I would like to emphasize that this one-on-one conversations that John mentioned earlier is definitely, that is very critical. In my team, my companies, that there are brilliant scientists and then definitely brilliant mind people. So just basically when I have a conversation with them, not and I try to ask the questions of what they're doing, but not from the perspective of just like nitty-gritty details of what they're doing. I try to ask the question of what do you want to accomplish? Mm-hmm. What do you want to really reach the goal? Everybody has a really good, in my opinion, everybody has a very good motive, and try to create the better world. If you are a scientist, try to understand whatever unknown thing, how to explain the things that everybody has the great ambition. So I think you just need to ask the questions that what do you want to accomplish? And then I a lot of times I see the eyes start shining when you ask the questions, and then they start explaining what they do, and then sometimes I don't understand some of those details, but just to show the curiosity and continue to show the curiosity from the leadership that what you do, and that they are really excited and passionate about what they do. And then if you as a leader open-minded and spend the time and listen to what they say, I think we can just get the good alignment. And then I think, and definitely then we can get better teams and then share the vision that way. So yeah, definitely the importance of the one-on-one conversation. Yeah, it is time consuming sometimes, but I think this time is very well spent, in my opinion.
Well, I think that's a great way to end, a very positive way to end the discussion today. So Franziska, John, Kazu, thank you so very much for your time today. It's been an incredible hour and 15 now. And Kazu, thank you very much to the team at NTT Research for the sponsorship as well. And it's thank you very much today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much once again to the sponsors of this roundtable discussion, NTT Research. And you will find the links to NTT Research's website and social channels and the notes that accompany this podcast or this video cast. And I encourage you to also download the discussion paper that accompanies this episode. And you can download it using the links and the notes that accompany this podcast and video cast as well. And if you'd like to hear more from our guests and their views on audacious and resilient leadership and on business more generally and leadership more generally, you can listen to the episodes that we've recorded independently with Kazu, with John, and with Franziska. The links are also in the notes that accompany this podcast. And finally, if you'd like to join the global movement for more principled leadership and more purpose-led business, then please go to principlesandleadership.com and subscribe. So I'm Paul, host of the new P&L. Thank you once again for listening to this fantastic roundtable today. Enjoy your day and speak again soon.